So California County is going to pay $20 million to local black families for land that was seized by the state decades ago. Bruce Beach was taken from a black couple through eminent domain more than a century ago and was returned to their heirs last year. There was legislation that was passed by the California Assembly. Well, on Tuesday, the family decided to sell the property to LA County for nearly $20 million. Now, the decision to sell Bruce's Beach was in the family's best interest in finally rebuilding the generational wealth they were denied for nearly a century. This is according to their attorney. Now, what's interesting here, Scott, is that and I've seen a lot of people commenting on this story. A lot of people, Scott, have been pissed off, saying, wait a minute, you know, there are people who fought for this land to come back to them, and how dare you sell it, and they could have gotten more. Well, according to the family attorney, he said the problem is, he said the land couldn't be developed. He said the problem is it couldn't be developed, so therefore it was zoned for public use, so they really, the only option they had was to actually sell it. You know, I understand the sentiment of people by saying, you know, like, oh, they shouldn't have sold it, but that's their rationale. Your thoughts?
Yeah, in the deal that where the city gave the land back to the family, in that contract, the city was going to rent it for $432,000 a month or a year, and the zoning issue was not addressed. Or the family at some point in the future could accept a $20 million payment from the city. They took the latter versus the former. But the problem with that analysis or logic, Roland, is that if it was zoned for public use, of course it was, because the city owned it and they took it from the ancestors. So why not, as you're part of your negotiation, negotiate or advocate for the zoning to be amended so that you could do development and create long-term wealth for the families as well as other black folks. That part of the story hasn't really been sorted out yet, and it could have been made part of the deal, or it could have been invested in and changing the zoning for long-term ownership.
The reason, Jason, as we look at, as I think about the Bruce Beach story and the Eatonville story, and the reason why this is so emotional to a lot of African Americans, because what it comes down to is the one thing that God is not making anything more of, and that's land. And what we know is that in the history of this country, how African Americans have lost land. We've lost millions of acres of land. We've talked to John Boyd talking about the loss of black farmers and losing their land. We know the history of African Americans who gave up land in the South because racists were threatening to kill them and they fled to the North. And so this is one of the reasons why this thing is still so emotional for a lot of people. I mean, even when you talk to black people in Harlem who are upset that that new generations, they sold brownstones for $300,000 and $400,000, and those brownstones now are worth $3 and $4 million. When you hear people talk about a house being passed down in a family, and then all of a sudden they're angry because a kid is like, well, I don't want to live there, so just get rid of the house. And some other family members like, yeah, but that's land. You're owning an asset. Just your thoughts.
Well, first of all, that's a topic that's a touchy subject for me because my family is one of those families in Harlem. A little more than 300,000 or 400,000, but still not what that land is worth. I looked on Zillow, even though it is basically a brand new house, my grandmother's house in Harlem. Last time I looked on Zillow, it was about $6 million. So I understand people saying that, but it's also a question of who's going to maintain it. You know, do you have the ability, the wealth, the manpower to maintain certain parts of land? I know anecdotally a couple of stories about people who have inherited apartment buildings and didn't maintain them and they got condemned. So I think one of the goals with land is to create generational wealth. And with this $20 million, I understand Scott's point about being able to keep land ownership. And we know after the Civil War, that was the primary goal of Black people, was to own land, to be able to control their own destiny. But I also understand that a lot of these families also may not have been able to control and maintain the property. And with $20 million, you can create quite a bit of generational wealth if you invest it correctly. So I think this family is still going to be okay. Whether they could have sold it for more, that I don't know, but that should have been part of the negotiation with the county earlier. But $20 million, I think, will do this family well. And if more Black families got $20 million settlements from the state, I think you'd see a lot more generational wealth within Black communities.
This is, it really does lead to an interesting dialogue, Monique, when we have this discussion, because people, folks always got opinions. I think back to a couple of sales that took place. Remember, there was a lot of anger among Black people when Bob and Sheila Johnson sold BET for $3.3 billion. And folks were angry. They were like, oh my goodness, what are you doing? And I had to remind people that for all y'all who were complaining, none of y'all pay a single BET payroll. Y'all wasn't trying to make ends meet when they were owning it. I said, and so if you built something, you built something with your own money and your hard work, and you're able to now be liquid, then I have to remind people that Bob and Sheila Johnson have taken that money from BET, and they've acquired all kind of other stuff that's worth more than what BET was worth. And here's the other thing that people also forget. BET it was private, then they went public, and so a number of employees still had shares, even when they went back to private. BET created more Black millionaires than any other company in American history. And so I get this emotional reaction to when somebody sells, but let's be honest, we're talking America, and we're talking capitalism. Everything is for sale in America.
Yes. I don't know what else to say. Yes, I've been on both sides of this issue. I very much felt Dr. Jason in the way that he responded. I've watched it happen, even in my own family. And at the same time, though, I had to remind myself that I was not in the seat of decision maker, nor was I with the responsibility for upkeep, as Jason was talking about. And what I see in a larger picture, Roland, to your point, is many times, because the whole conversation about people being upset about this, frankly, just kind of reminds me of the whole conversation with people being upset with Coach Prime. And it reminds me of every time people who have nothing to do with anything are upset about something when they're not the people who are making the decisions. And so everything is history and legacy and race and pride until we're the ones that have to turn down the check and the opportunity in order to do it. And so for me, I believe part of what we fight for in this country, part of what it means to be independent, to have liberty, to have equal access to opportunity, is to be able to make these decisions.
Right.
So if that family sought advice and those families took their 20 million, congratulations. Could somebody have made a better decision? Maybe. We don't know all the inner workings of it to have all those facts. Do I hope for the best for them? Absolutely, because it's more than they had, and they certainly didn't fight as long as they fought to walk away with nothing. And maybe that's what they were faced with. Maybe they were faced with a losing proposition. But just in general, I firmly believe, mind your business.
Well, again, people comment on stuff, but I always say, again, as if you don't have the full story, you really don't understand. And yeah, it's real easy to say, hey, don't do this, but you ain't the one who got to pay the bills. Simple as that. All right, folks, back to that Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. When you talk about Blackness, and what happens in Black culture. We're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.